Is conflict a good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing? Okay, what makes it a good thing? Okay. Yeah, I think conflict is not bad. Matter of fact, it's almost like if I meet a couple that has like zero conflict ever, I'm actually a little bit concerned. Because it's kind of like, oh boy, everybody's a little bit different, and so to me it means if you're not having any conflict, it means that you're probably not communicating very effectively. And so I think it's helpful to kind of have some conflict. I tell couples I can care less how much conflict you have. What I'm interested in is how you manage it, how you handle it, right? So that's to me the important piece. It's not the amount, of how it gets managed that makes all the difference in the world. And so this is what we want to kind of talk about this evening. How to win every argument, developing effective conflict resolution skills. I want to start off with the story. So as I mentioned, this evening is going to be a lot more interactive with each other. So I wanted to start off with the story. The story is about two ladies and an orange. Two ladies and an orange. The story goes like this. Two ladies walk into a courtroom. They're fighting over an orange. You're the judge. You have to decide who gets the orange. What do you do? Solomon, cut it in half. Right? So we cut the orange in half. Boom, right? One person gets a little bit, another people gets a little bit, and who's happy? It's interesting everybody knows that answer, right? So we cut it in half, we give everything to somebody, but nobody's happy. Okay, so what are some other things we can do? Give it to somebody else, right? Give me the orange, right? Both of you get out of here. None of you get the orange, right? I'm going to give it to some other passerby, right? Who's happy? Yeah, but maybe the one passerby who gets the orange, right? But the two people who came in, they're not happy. Okay, what else could we do? Yeah. What they want to do about it? They say, I want the orange. Another one says, I want the orange. Another one says, but I want the orange. Another one says, but I want the orange. So, okay, so maybe one's stronger, right? And so they beat up the other person, they take the orange. Huh? So that they're both happy. But how do we do that? We're the judge. How do we do that? Yeah. Okay. All right. So this now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere, right? Yes. So we want to kind of start to talk about it. And so we want to start off with the question, right? So what's the question that we're going to, so if we're going to talk about it, what's the question that we're going to ask that's going to help us to start talking about it, right? What makes the orange important, right? What makes the orange important? And so one person says, my grandmother turns 103 tomorrow. I'm making my famous orange cake. I need orange zest to make the cake. And, she's 103. We may not have another year, So I desperately need this orange, right? And I need this zest. The other person says, I haven't eaten in 5 days. I'm about to die. I desperately need to eat this orange so I can get a little sustenance just to get through another day. So I need to eat this orange. So one person wants the zest, which is the peel. The other person wants to eat the orange. What do you do? Yeah. Right? That's exactly right. Right? You peel the orange, right? By peeling the orange, you give one person 100% of the flesh, the other person 100% of the zest, and who's happy? Both leave 100% happy, right? So the question is, well, how come that wasn't our first go to? What happens? And this is the thing that oftentimes when we get into conflict, what creates the challenge is that we tend to start with solutions instead of starting with questions. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, so we divide the orange as we're waiting for some help here. So we peel the orange, and by peeling the orange, both people leave 100% happy. Now, what we just illustrated here are different types of conflict styles. So we actually touched on most of the conflict styles that are there, right? And so the conflict styles that we have is down at the bottom is the avoiding. This is when we took the orange and nobody gets it, we avoid, right? Because we're not really dealing with the issue, right? We're just saying, okay, I don't want to have to deal with who gets the orange, so I'm just going to take the orange and I'm going to run away. Or I can just say, I quit as judge, right? I don't want to have to deal with it, right? So some of us kind of, in our conflict with other people, we tend to avoid, right? But again, when we avoid, the issue never really gets solved. It just sits there and festers, right? And grows until either someone explodes or we start to kind of break apart, right? And then if we look up at the very far right, we look at accommodating. Accommodating is the individual who always just says, I want to keep the peace, whatever you want to do, right? Whatever you want to do. You want the orange? Okay, sure, I can starve to death. Go ahead. You take the orange. Oh, your grandmother's 103? Okay, yeah, you take the orange. Go ahead and use the zest, right? And I don't need it. Or, no, you take the orange. You need to eat it. Sure, my grandmother may not make it another year and she'll never have this cake again. But, that's fine, right? So we accommodate, right? But again, when we accommodate, internally we're really not happy, right? We sacrifice, but we really don't feel like internally that we're meeting our needs. We're not expressing our needs. And so sometimes in our relationships, we accommodate, and then all of a sudden, what happens when we accommodate too much? We start to feel resentful inside. Right? And that resentment builds up, right? And you start to what? Disconnect from the other person. Or you start to act passive-aggressively, right? Where you're saying, yeah, but then you're kind of sticking them in the ribs, right? So accommodation without necessarily expressing my needs ultimately leads to resentment, leads to kind of passive-aggressive behavior. Well, what about up top? So we have kind of competing, kind of a win-lose, right? Who makes the best argument? Right? Sometimes you have people in relationships, they just argue just to win, right? They don't even care about the issue. They just want the W, right? And so they'll argue you down, and they'll go into these circular arguments, and they'll do these emotional guilt trips, just to say, okay, but I won. I got it. I got what I wanted, right? But what that happens is, again, in those relationships, you have one person who may be happy that they got what they wanted, but the overall relationship is suffering. So again, that's not what we're wanting to get at. And so we look at these two in the far right-hand corner and up top, and then in the middle. So we jump to compromising early, right? And compromising, sometimes we do need to compromise. And we'll talk about when we need to do that. But oftentimes we jump to compromise first, not realizing that we can actually get a win-win. And so what we're really trying to get is, how do we get a win-win? Compromise sometimes is the solution that we have to come to, but don't jump there too quick. Let's see if we can actually get a win-win. If we ask a few questions, we might be able to actually get a win-win out of this. Make sense so far? So here's how we get to the win-win solution. Number one, we want to separate the people from the problem. What do we mean by that? Separate people from the problem. Oftentimes, when we get into conflict, we make it personal. You're always this way. You do it this way. You're lazy, right? And so we make it characterological, right? We make it about them and who they are instead of the issue, which is, would you please take out the trash? Right? So we move from, please take out the trash, to you're lazy, good for nothing, so-and-so. We move it from, would you mind, kind of calling me before you leave work so I can know where you are, to you're just like your mother. You're just like your dad. Right? So we move to being characterological instead of staying with the issue. Right? So the first thing is we got to separate the person from the problem. Number two, we want this, and this is what we did here, we want to state the problem in terms of interest and not position. This is the most important piece of all of today. We can do this. State the issue in terms of interest instead of position. What do I mean by that? The position is, I want the orange, right? It's saying, here's what I think. Here's my solution. I want the orange. That's my position. The interest is, I need to bake a cake. The interest is, I need to eat some food. We have to ask the question to get at the underlying interest. If we understand the interest, we have a better idea of what our options are. Okay, next story. Two sons walk into a judge's. Again, you're the judge again. Their father has just passed and had left them 3 antique guns that are very valuable. Right? So initially, it's pretty easy. One person says, okay, well, I'll get one gun. The other one says, okay, they get another gun. Who gets the third gun? But then they start arguing about who gets the guns, right? Okay, now, interest and position. What is the position? I want the gun. That's the position. I want the gun. Now, if we're going to ask interest, what would be the interest questions we could ask? What makes the gun important to you? Why, right? What makes the gun important to you? One person says, be honest with you, I'm a little bit down on my luck. And these guns are pretty valuable. I plan to sell my gun and get some money, right? And I would want to sell the third gun, and we'll split the money in half. He can get half, that's fine, but I really want to get the money, right? So I got my gun, I'm going to get the money for that. We'll sell the third gun, and I'll get the money from that, and then he can do whatever he wants with the other gun. The other father says, the other son says, I have 3 sons, and this was granddad's. I don't want to sell the guns. This is something that they can remember their grandfather. This is a memento. I really want actually all 3 guns, to be honest with you, so I can actually give 1 gun to each one of them. So that's the underlying interest. So what do? Buy them out, right? So that's an option, right? So one option is saying, well, okay, well, how much money did you want for these guns, right? Can I buy you out? If you need cash and I can get you cash, can I have all the guns, right? So that's an option, right? And again, we can actually sit here and generate lots of different options on how to solve that, right? But do you see how by understanding the underlying interest behind an issue, it makes solutions a lot more easier to kind of come up with versus getting stuck in the position, which is the guns. And oftentimes in conflict, we get stuck in the position and never get a chance to understand what's the underlying interest. So this is crucial. If you have one takeaway, if you just incorporated that one thing into the way that you manage conflict, you'll be able to solve a lot more conflicts in your relationships. All right, so define the problem in terms of needs and not solutions. We've kind of talked about that again. Again, I'll give you another practical example. So I was working with, and then again, when we think about this, it's not just even just conflict, but it's just basic problem solving. I was working with a high-powered exec many moons ago. And the question, and he was trying to, high-powered, they got to look executive, right? So he's like, I gotta get myself in shape. He says, but I'm already working between 70 and 80 hours a week, right? Because I'm trying to get up the corporate ladder. But I need to exercise. So I said, okay. So I said, well, let's think about this thing, right? Think about it in terms of needs and not solutions. So there was this question of where, if you need to, how often do you want to exercise? Well, if I can get 5 days, they say 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. I said, where do you get 30 minutes? You're already working 80 hours, right? I mean, you're going to get up 30 minutes earlier? You're going to stay up 30 minutes later? I mean, what are you going to do? Where do you make this happen? And so we started to kind of, again, think about it in terms of needs. I said, well, let's kind of break this thing out. If it's just 30 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week, that's 150 minutes. So maybe instead of thinking about getting 30 minutes a day, which seems a little bit unrealistic based on your schedule currently, because he was getting up like 4 a.m. and going to bed like, 10, 11 o'clock at night. It was insane. I said, maybe we just need to think about how do we find 150 minutes, right? Instead of trying to get 30 minutes a day, maybe find 150 minutes. Can we find 150 minutes? So when we started kind of thinking about 150 minutes, I said, well, do you have any downtime at all during the entire week? He says Sunday mornings, Sunday afternoons, football. That's my one guilty pleasure, is that I do watch football on the weekends. So I have my afternoon, I just block it out, I do that. I said, okay. So you have football. Anything else? What does your day look like? Walk me through your day. I get in, I sit down, so forth and so on. And so as we begin, again, thinking about needs, instead of just starting with solutions, the solution is you need 30 minutes a day, right? The need is, well, I need to exercise 150 minutes a week, right? That's really the need, right? And so we said, okay, well, I said, could we try an experiment? He said, yeah, let's try an experiment. I said, okay, there's some new science out that says sitting is the new smoking. Have you heard that? Yeah, sitting is the new smoking, right? And so I said, you're at a desk all day. What do you think about getting a standing desk? So I hadn't thought about that. I said, well, okay, that's a thought. And I said, what about meetings? What do you do for your meetings? He said, someone might take my phone, so forth and so on. I said, okay. I said, what do you think about maybe walking on a treadmill while you're in a meeting? So we're just kind of exploring different ideas. And I said, what about when you're watching the game, instead of just sitting on the couch, what about sitting on a bike? So we're just kind of exploring ways, right? And so through that, we came up with maybe about 7 or 8 different, ways of kind of doing this thing. And he took about 3 of them and said, okay, I think I can do these 3, right? And so he was like, I don't want to stand all day. Get it. He says, but I could take some meetings and walk. I can do that. Right? I don't have to sit down while I'm on the phone. I said, okay. So I said, so he got one of the, or what do you call these things, Fitbits, right? And so when he would be on his meeting, he would just be in his office pacing back and forth instead of sitting at his desk. So he'd just pace back and forth, pacing back. And in an hour-long meeting, he was getting 1,500 steps. So he's like, okay, this is good. And then on Sundays, he was like, I don't want to be on the bike the whole, that's my down day. I don't want to do, he says, but what I will do is, what if I got on the bike on the commercials? So doing that one block, he said, during the game, I want full attention. I want to be honed in, right? But he says, well, on the commercials, I said, well, there's enough commercials during a 3-hour game. You're going to get 30 minutes, And so again, by understanding the need, we were able to come up with creative solutions, right? And so again, that's the idea. As we're thinking about moving into trying to resolve conflict, it's moving away from position, understanding interest, not starting off with solutions, but starting off with the needs and then seeing what types of things come up as a result of that. Make sense? Okay. Identify common ground, shared interest at the beginning of the conversation, right? Where do we actually agree on things? And then finally, once a problem is clearly understood, stick to the issue until mutual solution is found or it's that an additional strategy is needed, right? And so this is kind of like how we begin to get at this win-win. Now, what if both ladies were hungry and they wanted the orange, right? So now what do we do there, right? Well, in that case, we actually do have to do a compromise, right? So we do have to figure out how do we work together in this. So first we strive for the win-win, but if it seems like we can't get there, then we do move to a compromise. Now, there's different ways of compromising. There's at least three ways of compromising. Symmetrical, complementary, sequential. What does that mean? Symmetrical means we cut the orange in half. You get half, I get half, right? And so in a practical sense, we may just say, you know what, we'll split our time. You get half the time, I get half the time, right? But then it may be complementary, meaning a compromise doesn't always have to be equal. It just needs to be mutually agreed upon, right? And so sometimes you may get more and I may get less, but if both people leave happy, then that's okay, right? So let's look at chores, for example, right? So I remember, a common question is, how do you divide up household responsibilities, right? And so, again, I remember one couple came in and they were like, so one partner was, I need more help around the house. Great, And so I said, well, let's get a chores list, right? So let's write down all the different chores in the house, everything that's there, right? They wrote it down. And so I said, okay, let's split it down the middle, right? And they looked at us and said, oh, no, I'm not happy with this. I said, well, okay, well, what aren't you happy with? I said, I don't mind doing this, I don't mind doing that, and I really don't want to do this. So when it was all said and done, I let them choose which ones they wanted to do, right? So which ones you wanted to do? They chose the ones that they wanted to do. They chose the one they wanted to do. It ended up being like 2/3 to 1/3, right? And then there was like 3 chores in the middle that no one liked to do. And so instead of talking about we need to split chores, the conversation was really of what do we do with these 3 chores? So it wasn't chores, it was these 3 chores. And so we spent time on how do we navigate these 3 chores. And then they left completely happy, even though one partner was doing 2/3 and the other person was just doing 1/3, right? They were content with that, right? Because that's kind of how they wanted to run their life, right? And so again, when we think about complementary, sometimes the solution doesn't have to be equal, and we have to get out of our mind that unless it's equal, it's not fair, right? If it meets the need, if it satisfies what we're trying to accomplish, that might be enough, right? The last type of compromise is a sequential compromise. What a sequential compromise simply is this. This time we'll do it your way, next time we'll do it my way, right? And so we go back and forth, right? So, so for example, a sequential compromise. I was, dealing with a situation where one person was super extroverted, another person was super introverted. And they were getting in conflict, we need to go out some more. And they were, can't we just stay home? And another person was like, and then we always stay home. We never go out. I'm dying in here. Right? And so now we're having this tension that's here. And so again, how do you create a symmetrical compromise out of that? We're going to go out for 3 hours and then go in for 3 hours. I mean, that doesn't work, right? So how do you navigate that, right? So the way it gets navigated is sequentially, right? Okay, this month we're going to go out. Next month we're hanging, right? And so they were able to kind of develop this balance with both people's needs, and it was predictable and expected, right? That's another piece, is expectation, right? That expectation was there, so that they was like, okay, I can reliably depend on this, right? Part of what creates stress is the unreliability of desires and expectations. When is this going to happen, right? So we have a conflict. It says, are we going to talk about this? Yes, let's talk about it. When? I don't know. That's not going to work, right? We got to lock this thing in, right? We need parameters around this thing, right? So sometimes compromises are necessary, and these are the different types of compromise that we can kind of I use to kind of solve some of the challenges we run into. Okay, this is a great technique, particularly for those who have yes syndrome, people who have a tough time saying no, people pleasers. For our people pleasers in the room, it's our yes, no, yes technique here. William Ury out of Harvard University kind of developed this idea. It's a very simple technique. The first thing is, yes, I'm going to say no, right? We have to actually give ourselves permission to say no. Because sometimes we feel guilty for saying no. We feel obligated to say no because it's a family member or a friend. We feel like, it's culturally expected that we would say yes. So we have all these external pressures that says you need to say yes, right? So the first yes for you is to give yourself permission to say no, right? Now, of course, when you say no, that's when all the tricks and manipulations come out, right? Right? And so you're going to give yourself permission to say no, and then you're going to say no. Can't do it. Right? But here's the next part. You say yes, here's what I'm willing to do. Right? Because just saying no sometimes doesn't feel good, right? You can't sleep at night. I feel like I should be doing something, right? So the second yes is, here's what I can do. Right? So I can't do this, but I'm willing to do this, right? And so here's some of my go-tos, right? So I love to give referrals with my yes, no, yes. Can you do X? I can't do it, but I know someone who might be able to. Send them off, right? Or I would let them know what I would be willing to do, right? I can't do this in this way, but here's what I can do. And if you can accept it, great. If not, I understand. But here's what I can do, right? And so again, this idea with this yes, no, yes is it really kind of allows you to set a boundary without necessarily feeling like you have to do something that's going to disrupt the relationship. Right? Now, when the person tries to continue to use that guilt trip on you, then you have to kind of come back to the very top and say, yes, I'm going to say no. No again. Right? And then just continue to reiterate exactly what you said. Right? So you become kind of a broken record. Right? You become kind of a broken record. Now sometimes they'll say something to try to get you off your game. Right? Like he says, hey, do you want to go to the gym? Do you want to do X? Do you want to, it'll be at the store. Do you want to give $1 to the kids? No, not this time. Oh, you don't care about kids? Right? Right? So they try to kind of, try to rope you in, right? And so again, what I would say, if instead of doing a broken record, just lean into it, right? Now, I love kids. I'm just not giving money today. Right? Kids are great. I'm just not going to give money to these kids. Right? Right? So sometimes you're going to become a broken record, and then sometimes you just lean into it. Oh, you can't spend time with me? I can't spend time with you today. No, I can't do it. Just lean into it. Don't make excuses for it. Lean into it. Yeah, this is where I'm at. And then when you lean into it, most people don't expect you to lean into it. They expect the excuses, and then they want to pick away your excuses. Right? No excuses. No, I ain't doing it. I'm tired. Well, they don't know what to do with it, right? Oh, okay. Then you go back to, well, here's what I am willing to do. And you lock it in, right? So broken record, or just kind of just lean into it. I lean into it so much sometimes, it's not even, you don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. However, I'll put it in the queue. I can get it back to you in 3 weeks. That's not enough time. Well, that's the time that I have. If that doesn't work for you, I can definitely refer you to somebody else. Right? So that yes, no, yes is a very simple strategy, particularly for our people pleasers, as a way of navigating not having to just say no, but to be able to maintain that boundary. Okay, so identifying some roadblocks to success. Some common problems. Number one is not handling your emotions first. Right? So if I'm in an emotionally distressed state, if I'm in a fight, flight, or freeze state, I'm not going to be a good place to navigate, right? So if I'm in a fight mode, or I'm in a freeze mode, or I'm in a flight mode, I'm not going to be able to kind of do this problem solving, right? So the first thing I do have to do is learn kind of emotional regulation skills, right? I have to be able to kind of, regulate my emotions so I can stay engaged. When we move into a survival state is simply when you move into a fight, flight, or freeze state. How do I know I'm moving into a fight, flight, or freeze state? I'm now acting purely on emotion and no longer thinking anymore, right? My respiration goes up, my tone or my inflections start to go up. You ever see someone as they get agitated, their voice goes higher and higher and higher? Okay, yeah, okay, you're no longer regulated. We can't have a meaningful conversation anymore, right? So I have to be able to kind of regulate, myself, right? I have to breathe, right? 3-5-7 breathing, right? So I'm gonna inhale to the count of 3, hold to the count of 5, exhale to the count of 7. Do that 2 or 3 times. There's a parasympathetic response that happens in the body that begins to relax it, and I can become more engaged again. Sometimes when I'm working with someone and I see them becoming dysregulated, I realize there's nothing else I'm going to say now that's going to be landing. So I just stop, and I say, okay, let's ground, let's breathe. There's different techniques, lots of different techniques that we can do. So, I want to see that parasympathetic response. You can see it in the eyes where you can kind of see them engaged again. And then it's kind of like, okay, can we continue or do we need more time, right? Trying to have a conversation to solve a problem when someone is not emotionally engaged, it's an exercise in futility, right? Because literally, the frontal cortex is offline, right? They're in emotional survival mode, right? So either I'm just trying to protect myself, and the way I'm going to protect myself is by fighting or by emotionally shutting down or completely avoiding, right? And so I need to kind of recognize that. Are there some emotional roadblocks? 2, focusing on the person, not the problem. We've talked about that. Not defining the problem properly. We've talked about that as well. And then not evaluating or clarifying during the collaboration. Like, what are we really talking about? Sometimes we kind of slip into a position or we slip into a solution. So sometimes we need to back up a little bit and saying, are we still kind of talking about needs? Are we still talking about interests? So make sure you're not slipping into some of these other areas. Because sometimes we start off and then we quickly slip into a position and then we get locked into it. And then not working out the details. Once you have a plan, I think maybe most of you have heard about SMART goals. If not, SMART, S-M-A-R-T, specific, measurable, achievable, reliable, or realistic, and then time-bound or time-sensitive, right? So SMART goals is an important way when you come up with a goal that you lock this thing in so we know that we actually are going to accomplish something. The looser the goal, the less likely it's going to happen, right? If I say to you, I want to lose weight, right? I want to lose weight. That almost doesn't mean a whole lot at all, right? I'm going to say, well, how much weight do you want to lose? In what time frame, right? So I want to lose 100 pounds in 2 weeks. No, sorry, it's not realistic. It's not attainable, right? So just to say I want to lose weight is not a good goal, right? I need to be able to be specific. I want to lose 30 pounds in 6 months, right? Okay, that's specific and that's measurable, right? I can say, well, how many pounds do I need to lose each month to make that goal, right? Is it achievable? Sure, if I'm doing eating and exercise changes. So now I'm asking, what are you doing to attain that goal, right? Is it relevant and realistic? Yes, relevant and realistic. Is it time-bound? Yes. If I say I want to lose 30 pounds, I say, okay, great. When? I don't know, over the next 5 years. What am I going to do with that? So again, you want it time-bound where it's meaningful, right? So SMART goals. So you want to make sure that it's detailed enough where you can actually follow through on something. And then finally, you want to have some type of follow-up plan. What are we doing to actually follow up on whatever we're doing? And then you want to make sure there's no something that sometimes gets people stuck is that there's a hidden or an unconscious agenda, right? So you're trying to kind of go through all of these areas, and it seems like you keep on not moving forward, and oftentimes it's because there's actually an underlying agenda that's there, or a hidden agenda that's there. So you have to kind of stop and say, okay, what's holding this thing back? And it's kind of like, well, I really don't X, and so, again, working with another situation, and was just a sense of we're doing this forgiveness work, and as we're moving forward, we just kept on hitting a roadblock, and finally I'm saying, I just kind of met with them individually. It's like I'm just trying to understand what's going on here, but it boiled down to is like I feel like this person needs to be punished. So So if that idea is there, I think this person needs to be punished, right? Then no matter what we come up with, this hidden agenda of this person needs to be punished is always going to keep any meaningful healing or any meaningful solutions to kind of take place. Okay, watch out for emotional flooding, as I mentioned. When we feel this fight, flight, or freeze, it takes about 25 minutes for the stress hormones to be re-regulated in the system before we can have a meaningful conversation. If a person shuts down, don't follow them into the next room, right? Wait a minute, I'm not done talking to you yet. It's like if they're shutting down, it's just gonna get worse, right? We gotta maybe disconnect for a little bit. It's going to be about 30 minutes, and then we can re-engage, right? This is strictly from a physiologic standpoint, right? So it has nothing to do with you. If I get emotionally flooded, the body takes time to re-regulate itself. Think about it like this. Have you ever been walking down the street or something, some dog comes barking, woof, woof, right? What happens? Your heart starts beating real fast, right? Your muscles all tense up, right? You see the dog behind the fence, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm safe. But does your body automatically say, okay, great, cool, I'm good now? No, you're like, whew, boy, okay. I was okay, right? Right? The body's still regular, it's still coming down. It takes time to kind of re-regulate itself. It just shot a bunch of hormones into your system. Just shot a bunch of adrenaline, shot a bunch of cortisol, right? Because it's getting ready for action, right? And now it takes time for all that stuff to kind of get reabsorbed into the system where I can re-engage again, right? It's the same thing that happens in relationships. When we get into a conflict, boom, and those hormones get pushed into the body because it's kind of like, oh no, what's going on? It takes time for the body to re-regulate, right? So when we notice that flooding, we have to kind of disengage a little bit. You can identify a time to come back, but trying to push through typically is not going to be very helpful. Okay, so how to prevent flooding. We talked about meditation and breathing, taking time out. We've talked about that. Observing. So just notice, like, what are the things that when I'm getting kind of dysregulated, what do I notice, right? And how do I kind of communicate to the person? Okay, I'm starting to get a little bit flooded here. I actually I need to kind of step away a little bit, right? So how do I just observe what's going on? Then here's an interesting one. Store a positive picture of the other person. By studying a positive picture, sometimes we can make that change that makes the difference. Okay, that's it. So that's all we have. So I'll open up the floor for any questions that folks may have or anything that would be useful. Yes? So that's a good question. So if I'm dealing with someone who's narcissistic or is more on the selfish side of things, this is kind of where some of that yes, no, yes kind of comes in, meaning you would have to kind of set up more clear boundaries and expectations, right? And then from there, as you kind of set up these boundaries and expectations, then we can kind of start to engage, right? Someone who tends to be more selfish, they're kind of only thinking about themselves. And so sometimes the temptation is, okay, well, if I just acquiesce or kind of try to appease them, then maybe I can get something back, right? But if they are only thinking about themselves, they're only going to give something if it's going to serve their interest, right? So in those cases, you do have to kind of say, okay, well, I need to be able to set a boundary with them, and then from there kind of identify, how can I still be, again, as we talked about this morning, how do I love them without anything in expectation, but not necessarily allow myself to then kind of be taken advantage of, right? And then if someone is truly like very, very selfish and very narcissistic, um, you really have to pray for them. No, seriously, no, like seriously, like they need treatment to really deal with that. You
Or to emotionally regulate yourself when you're dysregulated.
Sure. So I'll go over. Yeah. So there's a couple, as I mentioned. One is kind of just a simple breathing technique, right? So we can do it now. We can do it now, right? So I want you to just notice in your bodies right now, scale from 0 to 10, how much maybe tension or stress may be there. It's probably not super high, but it's maybe warm in here. It's a Sabbath afternoon. I don't know, but get a sense. Maybe it's a 3, maybe it's a 4, whatever it might be, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to inhale to the count of 5. So we're going to really fill up our diaphragm, right? And to the count of 5. So we're going to inhale to the count of 5. Sorry, inhale to the count of 3. And then we're going to hold it to the count of 5, about 5 seconds. And then when we exhale, you're going to exhale, not, but to the count of 7. So we're going to keep on pushing it out until we get to 7. Ooh, good question. When you're in, yes. So when you're inhaling, you can inhale through the nose, and then you're going to exhale through the mouth. Right? So let's try it. Right? So first, get a read about where you are in terms of like stress and tension in your body right now. It's not going to be super high, but just kind of register. And we're going to inhale, hold, exhale. Let's do it again. Inhale, hold, exhale. Okay. Now do that body check. And how many feel their tension and stress a little bit lower than when you first began? Yeah. So that's a simple, again, one breathing technique that you can do. Another one that you can do is, what's very interesting is what you shift your attention to, whatever you focus your attention to, um, shifts also the sensation in the body, right? So, and now, very simple example. Have you ever kind of woken up in the morning with like a headache, and then you get into the day, right, and you don't even notice the headache, and then you get to the end of the day, and you feel like the headache is still there, right? But you really didn't feel it throughout the day, right? It's because I shifted my attention to 1,000 other things, right? So if I shift my attention to something that is more pleasant or more neutral, again, it shifts the body to a more pleasant, neutral place, right? And so you may want to have something that brings you you may have something that, that may bring you a memory or an image or a situation that brings you a sense of joy or a sense of peace or a sense of courage that you kind of bring your mind to. And as you bring your mind to it, then you start to actually engage your senses around it. Like, for example, one of my places that I go to is my parents owned a cabin in Tennessee. Beautiful place, off in the woods, and the wood grain porch, and you just look out and you see the fields, you hear the trees, deers will be running through, turkeys will be running through. And so, sometimes when I get stressed, I just, again, think about that place. I think about leaning on the porch, feel the wood grain pushing into my forearms. I smell the smell of the spruce and pine. I look out, and as I'm doing that, again, I feel kind of a relaxation kind of come over me. Right? It may be a memory, it may be something real, or it could be imagined. But whatever we shift our attention to, oftentimes has a way of regulating. There's lots of great apps out there. There's Calm, there's iChill. So there's lots of great apps that also kind of do those types of exercises. You may ground. So grounding is another one where you would kind of, place your feet on the ground, or you may lay down, you may sit down. And, and then you would kind of, again, allow your body to be very present. A lot of these skills are really about, one, activating the relaxation response, and two, bringing the mind present. Because a lot of stress is either obsessing about something in the past or worrying about something in the future, right? So it's about bringing yourself present and being engaged in the present, and bringing your senses to the present as well, and that can activate kind of a relaxation response as well. So those are a couple. There's lots, but those would be three that are very quickly accessible. But there's definitely great apps out there that has lots of different. iChill is another great app as well. So. I'll repeat it, whatever you say.
That um, I have a family who this marriage is constantly competing for the win, and it's very it's generational, because this is a generational problem, and that's manifested in their marriage, and it has now trickled down to their children. And now the daughter is trying to win and competing with her parents, who are competing amongst themselves, who they're just in constant competition. And it's really hard to navigate a conversation, because shutdown happens in two of the three individuals. And they're all dealing with some very difficult issues right now as a family. And so they seek help in trying to figure out or understand the problem, but they keep focusing on the problem without the interest. They don't get to the root, and I think it's to get to the root is so difficult because they don't know how to. And so I just think that the timing of this is just perfect, so I wanted to thank you for this, because I believe that there's some really important tools here that if we just can try to understand how to teach ourselves and others how to navigate through the uncomfortableness of the issues that we face in our homes, that we have a better chance of removing the resentment and allowing the healing that comes from some type of understanding. And I think it's the lack of understanding that allows that permits the avoidance that leads to complete shutdown. So I think we've all experienced that. I know personally I have. And so this just is a very practical way, but it makes so much sense. So I really pray that you continue to share this message with others, Doctor. And I know for myself that I want to take this and share it to see how we can help each other. But in this case, I mean, this is my family we're talking about. And so, but there's hope, because we have platforms like this, and we just need to talk about it. So thank you.
I appreciate that, and that's exactly right. And again, what's interesting about what I found is that I'm a scientist, I'm a behavioral scientist. So I'm looking at the research, I'm looking at studies after studies, and I consistently find the things that we're finding in science have already been talked about in Scripture, right? That, I think sometimes, like for example, in 1 Timothy, be slow to speak, right? Listen, right? That, again, yeah, that's, people get millions of dollars in funding to actually prove that verse that was there. So there's so much richness that we can pull out, and so it's good to kind of see the confirmation of both of those things, and this is why I see this is an important ministry for our churches, because again, I'm all about prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in the power of Scripture, right? Those things are true, but God has blessed individuals with gifts and talents to work with the mind and work with relationships. You know, I oftentimes use the illustration, you know, if I fall out of a tree and I break a leg, does God have the power to heal me? 100%, right? If is he likely to heal me in that moment? Probably not, because he's giving gifts to doctors, and he's going to help me get over to that doctor so the doctor can be blessed as well, right? Fulfill his gift, right? Now, if I'm in the middle of the Amazon someplace and there's no doctor around for miles and miles, I may get a miracle, right? So that may happen, right? So if we fall down and hurt ourselves and we go to the doctor, then when we get hurt emotionally, when we're hurting mentally, why do we feel like there's shame in being able to go to someone to get help, right? That God has also gifted individuals to work with the mind, to work with the emotions, to work with the relationships, to bring healing. Just as much as the healing of the bone, we also need healing of the mind and healing of the heart. Okay, it is 4 o'clock, so we'll finish here for today. I'll stick around for a little bit. If folks have questions, I'll hang around for a little bit, and I can be happy to answer any questions that folks may have at a one-on-one level. But I just want to say thank you so much for the warm kind of welcome that I've had here. It's been a beautiful experience. This won't be my last, so hopefully I'll be able to be back again, and bring the family and just kind of hang out a little bit. It's been real nice. So thank you so much for this opportunity.